Welcome to a special episode of the Remarkable Retail Podcast, featuring part 2 of our interview with noted retail journalists Chantal Fernandez and Lauren Sherman, talking about their fabulous new book, Selling Sexy, Victoria's Secret, and the Unraveling of an American Icon. Steve picks up the conversation, asking about Victoria's Secret's role in elevating supermodels to new heights in the cultural zeitgeist. Then we explore the end of Victoria's Secret's dominance in retail, the complicated genius of Lex Wexner, and lessons learned for retail leaders.
And Lauren, maybe, and again, we don't want necessarily go through too much history, and of course, we want people to go actually check out your book. So we don't want to give everything away, but one of the things that maybe some of our younger listeners won't appreciate is, from my impression, the concept of a supermodel was almost originated by Victoria's Secret. Is that fair to say, or at least took it to a whole new level?
I think it commercialized modeling in a new way. So the way the modeling industry worked, so the supermodels really started to come up in the 80s. They had real personalities. Obviously, there are some from the 70s. Is it Christy Brinkley? Yeah. 70s, Lauren Hutton in the 70s. Like, these people became brand names. But in the 80s, like Naomi, Cindy, Christy, Linda, like, these are people whose names you don't need to say their last name. And that is when models sort of became larger than life and became stars in and of themselves. And it's also when fashion became bigger. Like, Karl Lagerfeld staged his first Chanel fashion show in the early 80s, and he sort of changed the game. He made fashion marketing. And so Victoria's Secret, again, Wexner identified that. He saw that was happening in high fashion, and Ed Razek, his longtime kind of jack of all trades CMO guy, also saw that. And they were really interested in taking what was happening in high fashion. This is also the time of MTV's House of Style, and fashion was starting to become a part of culture. And so in this more mass way than it had been previously. And they took those ideas and commercialized them further and brought them to way more people. And so Wexner wanted these runway models, these Chanel campaign models, to be in his catalog because he thought it would elevate it. And he was right. And he really pushed Laura Berkman, who was the casting director and kind of ran the marketing for the catalog, to recruit them and bring them in. Stephanie Seymour, Claudia Schiffer, these people, it took a lot of convincing, and it wasn't just about money. There were a lot of things, but what it did was, previous to that, the way modeling often worked was that you would have one campaign and you are exclusive with them. So if anyone who's watched the Supermodel doc will know about Christy Turlington's campaign with Calvin Klein, and for a while she was really locked in and couldn't really do anything else, and they ended up getting her out of it. And I think she still did some campaigns for them, but was able to do other work. But what Victoria's Secret did was, they didn't care if you had other contracts. You could do high fashion stuff. It made them look better. And it became, especially for the next generation of supermodels like Giselle, Tyra Banks, those folks, it became a very lucrative contract. And especially if you were based in the US or you were an American model, it was seen as sort of the ultimate goal by the mid 2000s going into the 2010s, because it could buy you your house and do all that stuff, but it was still okay to do high fashion. The high fashion world wasn't going to kind of poo-poo you because you were doing Victoria's Secret. And it's a pretty amazing feat that they pulled off. When you think of something like Fredericks of Hollywood or the Spiegel catalog or anything that was a little bit more mass than luxury, there are very few brands that can sit with the really high end and not diminish someone's personal brand. And they were able to strike that balance. So yeah, they made modeling a real business. That's for sure.
Chantal, I'm going to throw this one to you. We've just had this discussion, and the book is evidence of a very innovative retailer. People are writing books about how innovative they are and moving things forward. in your assessment, are they kind of like an innovator's dilemma? Because then they became kind of slow to embrace change, and the book talks about that, and from e-commerce where they're initially strong to less so. So I guess, how did they kind of lose their way? Was it just didn't keep up with the times, executives, or what's your assessment?
Yeah, I think there was a period, our reporting showed, like after, in the second half of the 2010s, where there were fewer executives who could really challenge Wexner. And, it was a difficult corporate culture to sort of agitate for change. You were not really incentivized to do that. And also the company had been so successful for so long, and really having a one-way conversation with the audience, in a sense, saying, really setting the tone, dictating that this sort of silhouette of bras, a molded cup, underwire bra is the bra that, everyone is wearing. It was a one-way conversation. And as social media started to change those things, I think it was very difficult from their lofty perch to see the ramifications of that. For example, we talk in the book a lot about the rise of the bralette, which is a soft, almost like a t-shirt bra that became very popular in the 2010s and has only increased in popularity. And that was a real sort of existential threat to the Victoria's Secret business model, because it was a low margin, easy for any apparel company to make. And I think they really underestimated the impact of that. But it makes sense if they still had multi-million-dollar business selling push-up bras, even though it was shrinking each year. It's like, how do you navigate that reality and what it means for the future of your business? As a public company, there was a lot of pressure on them. But yeah, I think it's a classic story in some ways, where company becomes so big that you're blinded to the reality of your situation until it's too late. And I think, in particular, Wexner was sort of surrounded by executives who did not dare challenge him at a certain point. And that's how it led to some really challenging years like 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, that were, the company did not fall off a cliff, but the profit margin sort of collapsed. And compared to its performance for decades, it was a disaster.
I'm sure just in general, many people in the audience would be aware of Les Wexner's very unfortunate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And, there's plenty out there if people want to get into that. And you certainly touch on that a bit in the book. But I'm wondering from a takeaway standpoint, as we think about leadership lessons, Lauren, are there other things as you look at Wexner in terms of both the things that led to his success, but ultimately may have led to the downfall? And then I guess my follow-up question for either one of you is, we have seen some companies that have been able to turn themselves around from somewhat similar situations. Abercrombie and Fitch is the one that leaps to mind. But I'm just kind of wondering, what do you take away from both the genius as well as the failings of Les Wexner as a leader?
Well, I think it's this idea, don't become the thing you're trying to disrupt, and how hard that gets the more powerful you become, and the more insulated you become. So Wexner, what he did really well, first of all, he didn't take much of this personally. I'm sure there were things he took personally and interpersonally or what have you, but he was very clinical about how he operated, and he did the right thing. So again, like I said, he didn't let his personal taste get into it. And so if something wasn't working, he would sell the company or change the way that they operated. He sold the Limited, which was the company he founded, the reason he became a billionaire, and he let it go of it because he knew that time was over. He spun off Express, he spun off Abercrombie and Fitch, and all of these decisions, there are different reasons behind why he did these things, but they were done because it was what he had to do. Whereas a lot of founders tend to hold on to things longer than they should because they think that the company needs them, or that they're the only ones that can fix it or make it good. He was able to let go of things. Unfortunately, with Victoria's Secret, that was the one. And it's funny because it's not a company he actually founded, but that was the one. And I think it was because it was the crown jewel, and it was the one that really not put him on the map, but made the company so successful for so long that he could not see past he could not see past himself when things had really started to change in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Not only Chantal mentioned the rise of the bralette, which is something we pinpoint as a sort of example of greater issues they were having in the business, but also just like social mores were changing in the way people viewed what is sexy. Like our culture's so fragmented now. There's not one idea of sexy. And I think it was in 2014, he did an interview with the Wall Street Journal. And that's probably the last like real interview he did as an executive it was pre all the like Epstein commotion and everything. And I remember he said something about like smartphones are going away. And it's just like, he was actually right about the fact that we need physical retail. But he was just so at some point, and some executives pinpoint this era too, like late 2000s, 2008, 2009, 2010, when they were just doing so well. And he was also able to navigate the recession like much better than most of his competitors. And so there was just something about I'm sure he just felt invincible. And I think Ed Razek and a lot of the people close to him also felt invincible. And there was just no one saying no to him. Right. And so it's just that classic story of he was so successful early on because he was constantly questioning himself and questioning his methods and tweaking and iterating and making things better. In the late 90s, he brought in all these consultants, which, you know, they did some good, they did some bad, but he understood that the business was like run really provincially and needed to be professionalized and sort of standardized in terms of technology and supply chain and things like that. And so he was able to still see his faults. Whereas by 2015, 2016, I think they peaked in revenue and profits in 2016. At that point, like he thought he knew what he was doing when he closed the catalog, when he shut down Swim, which was like a huge business for them and is becoming a huge business again. When he did all that stuff, he just didn't care anymore. He thought he knew. And so I think that's the lesson. Like, and it's a really, really hard one to learn. I mean, we see this in business every single day where a founder or a really successful leader just like at some point loses the plot. And it is just another, it's not a huge, it is a cautionary tale, but it's also, it's just like a great, the book is like a giant case study in how to run your own business. And so,
and leadership too.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
These are the lessons that really stand out to me from Steve's book around leadership and not basically reading or believing your own press at some point.
Don't get high on your own supply, right? So what would be maybe just quick takes on what you think the prospects from both of you? What do you think would be the prospects for a Victoria's Secret turnaround, or what would be those elements that say a brand like Abercrombie and Fitch has been able to make happen that perhaps would make sense for Victoria's Secret, or maybe there's something else you guys see that they need to do?
Yeah, I think for me, the lesson from Abercrombie and Fitch, which has been such a fascinating turnaround to watch in the last couple of years and really impressive, is really understanding who exactly your customer is that you're targeting. You're going to draw in more people than that, but having a laser sharp focus on that customer group and what they care about, which at Abercrombie is sort of this young millennial, working with disposable income, maybe early parents who, it doesn't want to spend a ton on money, but wants trends, wants a good product for value, pretty obvious things, but thinking about how they spend their time. They have this whole thing about the long weekend and how they go on these 3-day weddings and what are they going to wear to those weddings and what are they wearing when they work from home, and hitting all of those things that, sounds really simple, but is really difficult to execute. Similarly with Victoria's Secret, while they've worked a lot on the marketing, and tried different things coming out of this turbulent period. Results have certainly varied, and they just brought back the runway show for the first time in 6 years. And there was a lot of interest in that, but I still feel like there isn't much conversation around the product that they actually sell and its value for its price point and, what they're delivering. And that historically fits into the Victoria's Secret. Wexner always said, we sell hope, not help. He didn't want to get bogged down in the product attributes. But I think that stuff's really important today. And it's unclear to me exactly like who their target customer is. And it feels still a little bit all over the place. But I think they have the potential to really turn around that business, because if you look at their revenue, they're still selling a lot of stuff, more than $6 billion. And if their margins have decreased as they have, then they're selling even more. So the stuff is moving, and I think they've been preoccupied with the marketing, and the product needs more investment. That's what I would say.
The product point Chantal made is really the product is the marketing these days, and that is the thing that Victoria's Secret hasn't figured out. I think the difference between Abercrombie and Victoria's Secret is just the use case for the purchase. So underwear and bras is what's that called? Replenishment business, right? So yes, there is novelty and it's good to have new and different things, and they're bringing in more clothing again. But the reality of it is you buy something that you think you like, it fits you well, and you keep buying it again and again and again. So I don't think that what Abercrombie has done, you can't apply it exactly, because what they're doing is really taking trends and turning them around quickly and making the product good. That's not what they need to do. They do need to focus on product being the marketing. And that's where any brand right now needs to, in my eyes, needs to have their focus.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Lauren and Chantal, this has been such a treat. I mean, we barely scratched the surface. We didn't even talk about the journey of pink within the brand that, listeners are just going to have to buy this great book. Now, if they want to get in touch with either of you, Lauren.
It would be terrible. As an author, I can tell you, you never want to say anything that would cause people to want to buy your book. But
No.
Lauren, how do folks get in touch with you? Maybe they get some juicy scoops, or they just want to touch base with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Lauren at puck.news. I'm always available.
All right. And that's my shout out too. Subscribe to Puck. It's amazing. Chantal, what about yourself?
Yeah, you can find me on thecut.com. Follow me on social media at Chantal FDEZ. And yeah.
Equally impressive and amazing. Thank you both so much for joining Steve and I on Remarkable Retail. It's a great journey, great book. We'll put a link to the book in the show notes. And I want to thank you both for your generosity of time and insights. It was a really great episode. So thanks again, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for tuning in. New episodes of Season 9 will be available each and every Tuesday, so be sure and tell your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us. If you liked our episode, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
And I'm Steve Dennis, strategic advisor, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of 2 books, Leaders Leap, Transforming Your Company at the Speed of Disruption, and Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, consumer retail growth consultant and advisor, keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur. You can learn more about me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.